This is Journeys of Empowerment. More than a podcast, it's a circle of belonging. A space where lived stories become turning points and clarity grows through reflection. I am Michiel Suchitrijt, and here we do not rush to answers. We slow down, listen deeply, and realign with what is true. Before we begin, I want to welcome our sponsor and partner, Reinforcer.ai. Managers give feedback every day. The real question is whether that feedback actually changed behavior. You have seen it happen. New processes, new training, and still adoption stalls. And momentum fades. Not because people do not care, but because insight alone rarely turns into new habits. Reinforcer.ai operates at the intersection of enablement, ethics, and habits. Right where insight either fades or becomes sustained change. By analyzing everyday conversations in one-on-ones and team meetings, it helps leaders see what reinforces the right behavior, what misses the mark, and what to focus on next time. Built on proven behavioral science, Reinforcer.ai makes practical, ethical, and part of daily work. So progress does not rely on good intentions, but on better feedback. If you want to improve behavior where it actually forms, you can learn more at Reinforcer.ai. What if regret is not about what went wrong, but what about what you already knew and didn't act on? In this episode, I sat down with Christopher O.H, author of C.O.U.R.A.G.E, 7 Choices for Living a Life Without Regret, and someone who has lived inside one persistent question. What does it really take to live without regret? Born in Sierra Leone and educated in the United States, Christopher built an international corporate career that looked successful from the outside, but over time, success stopped feeling like alignment. In 2018, that tension could no longer be ignored, leading him to step away and reassess his identity, agency, leadership, and responsibility. We explored why knowing is not the same as acting, how silence slowly turns into regret, what it means to reclaim ownership of your life, and why courage, if it's going to last, needs joy alongside resolve. He put it plainly, silence often becomes regret. And this line really landed hard. I wish I had the courage to live the life I wanted, not the life expected of me. As you listen, notice where you already know, what needs to change, and what keeps you hesitating. Let's walk into it.
Okay.
Well, welcome to Journeys of Empowerment, Christopher.
Yeah.
This is a funny way to start a podcast, right? We're live in the studio right now.
Okay.
Yeah, we are.
Good.
We are. And you know,
I don't know if I have his gravitas because he was super well respected, but we'll see how this goes.
Now, maybe explain a little where we were talking about before we move on to our conversation. What were we laughing about? What were we talking about?
Was the Cronkite one?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was saying in the US, those of us who watch old TV, this is going back to the 60s during the Vietnam civil rights era. He was sort of the most trusted man in America because so much was going on in the US. And he was the deliverer of all of that news, all the big moments, the big assassinations, the riots, lots of other things. And he's super well respected. And he's a simple guy, and he's sitting at his desk, and he has this old school, mic in front of him. And everyone knows who Walter Cronkite is. So that's what this makes me remember. And it's pretty heavy, it's pretty intense, because this guy is not a joke. He's quite a figure. And I have no closeness to him, but this makes me kind of feel like I can be him for a moment.
Ah, but you're used to be in situations where there's a healthy pressure, right?
Yeah, I think so. We'll see.
So welcome, Christopher. I'm happy to have this conversation with you, and it's interesting. I would love to start with the question: who are you becoming?
Yeah, well, there's interesting one. There's sort of who you are, which is how you kind of define the moment, and then lots of time we try to think about who we aspire to, which is sort of trying to be something else, and I'm uncomfortable with that one because I don't know what that truly means. because I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable understanding, at least having a conversation with myself about the work that needs to be done. And then you begin to do the work that needs to be done. And then that takes you on this process of becoming. And you want it to be something better. You want to be something that's rich and genuine and authentic, and that is full of knowledge and grace and lots of those kinds of things. But it's hard to pin at the end of that who I'm going to become. You know what I mean? We'll see when we get there.
Yeah.
Now I'm just going to be in that process of becoming. And so that's kind of how I want to start.
Yeah, that's clear.
I was born in Sierra Leone. I moved to the US when I was 18, 19 to go to college. And Sierra Leone was an amazing place to grow up in. It turned out to be a place that was in constant change from the day I was born up till today. Essentially, from around the time of independence, I think I was born not too long after that, to sort of general erosion of life, economy, politics, civil society, to a very, disadvantaged place today. But still at its core, still a happy place, happy people, but they've gone through a lot. So in the middle of that, I and many other people, maybe of my age, wanted to seek, as they say, go seek your fortune somewhere else. And then we were part of that 80s, 90s brain drain, that came out of Africa, definitely West Africa, and Sierra Leone was no exception. And so moved to the US and then ended up building a career there, going to school, building a career. Became quite comfortable working in different corporate roles until 2018. In that spirit of where you are and then what you want to become, begin to realize that I've done a lot of great things, a lot of good things, but still not feeling like I'm maxing out all the cylinders. Like I haven't really done the thing I'm supposed to do. I mean, I don't know what that is. I think you kind of have a sense when you have an impact. And I was having an impact on the business world, but there's more to life than just being successful at work. So you're feeling, okay, I'm leaving something behind. And to get a sense of that, I had to then go back and look at the rest of my life up to that point. All the paths, all the countries, all the milestones, all the accolades. And then you realize that, okay, I've developed a lot of skills. I've grown a lot. But I've had a lot of people invest in and support that growth. But now the reflection is, am I using all of that? And am I using all of that in a way that's building or creating something sustainable, lasting, impactful, and not just to companies, but to society at large? And then that's where you realize, okay, there's a bit of a gap there. And so that's the process of now going into being more aware. Maybe that's a becoming. Maybe that's the start of the becoming.
Yeah.
Becoming more aware of here's what you have to work with. And it's a lot because that's not where I started. This is the result of a lot of time investment and growth. What do you do with it? And how do you consciously and intentionally do with it the things that make you not feel this sense of gap, this sense of loss? And so that's the process.
It is
to
a
keep
process.
on doing and trying and exploring and impacting so that I'm not ever living with a sense of loss. Don't feel like you lost a moment to do something, say something. Don't feel like you live in a moment when you lost the opportunity to impact someone's life or impact a situation. Always feeling like I can't live with this sense of loss going forward. And so that's the process. Where it takes me, who knows?
Time will tell. Time will tell.
But I think the design, and it's not my design, I think it's a more natural instinct, is that, is to always be in this, have this sense of peace, of harmony, of impact. You can always do better, but at least you're not feeling like I just wasted something, wasted a resource, wasted time. And I think that's the sense that I got in 2018, saying I'm not firing on all the cylinders. There's a whole lot that I've not unpacked yet. There's a whole lot you haven't used yet, and you need to start using all of it. Because, at the time I was closing in on my 50s, don't have a lot of time. You're not going to have forever to do it. So, and it's not
time
too late
is
to
now.
start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not too late to start. It's not too late to start. It's not too early to start that journey, whatever that is. I mean, young people have lots of things going on in their heads, but I would love to have had that level of awareness and intentionality much earlier. But I was so busy doing lots of other things.
That sounds almost like a regret.
It's definitely on the way to regret. Absolutely. When I started to do this work, and I will come back and talk about courage and how I landed on courage. But when I started to do this work, and I started to play with this notion of courage, and I wanted to learn more about it, and I asked people about courage and what it meant to them, and I realized that lots of people were uncomfortable talking about it, either because they hadn't thought about it, or they had a much more superficial, relationship with the concept. Bravery, yeah, you jump in a river, you save the baby from drowning. Okay, done, move on. And so they hadn't really unpacked it like I was trying to. And also, I thought, and I found, at least speaking with people, that sometimes people are uncomfortable putting this label on themselves. It almost feels too presumptuous. Oh, I'm courageous. What does that mean? It almost feels like you'd rather someone call you courageous than you call yourself courageous. So I wasn't really getting good answers in the early part of trying to understand what courage is. So I decided it was a weird feeling that came up on me one day. Say, are people ever honest about anything? It was a random question. I was like, I'm trying to get good answers. Yeah, no one's giving me good answers. When are people going to just be honest? And I said, people might, then I kind of turn it inward. If I had nothing to lose, let's say I'm being morbid for a second. I have nothing to lose. Let's say I'm dying. Maybe I will just say whatever I want to say. I wouldn't care. I would just let it all out. So that's a weird path to think through, but that's my thought process. And then I go online and I do some research on deathbed confessions.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I wanted to find where I felt people could be very honest and carefree, and then what would come out of their mouths. And so it's this process of searching that I come across this book.
Bronnie from...
Bronnie Ware, exactly. That's how I found that
The
book.
5 Regrets of the Dying.
Exactly, 5 Regrets of the Dying.
She's a palliative nurse.
Exactly.
And, I read the book.
Yes.
It's amazing,
exactly.
right?
And then she had the top 5.
Yeah.
And number 1 was, I wish I'd had the courage, to do, what I wanted for myself, not what was expected of me, or something to that effect. And I was like, that's it. So when people are in this late stage of life, and they're now just thinking back on how many decades.
Connecting the dots.
Yeah. And she, with all of this research, I think over a decade, the number one thing was, I wish I'd had more courage. And I was like, that's what I was looking for. And that kind of was my instinct, that this thing, courage, is a really powerful one. And for it to be the thing that people in their dying moments ping as where the regret is. So it seems that you mentioned this idea of regret. Yeah, because in real time, I think we know what that regret feels like. But we find a way to minimize it. Yeah, we find a way to minimize it. Or,
to ignore it.
We ignore it, or we push it off, so I'll get to it later. I'll just pack it away here.
Why do you think we do that?
I think because of the way we're set up as a human society. There's a lot going on. Expectations, ambition. I think for me, the biggest one is structures. We've created predictive structures that we almost work within. You might use the word conform with, just so that society is ordered. And we're all different, and we react differently to different things. But I think we've generally all become really good at living within those structures. And those structures are prescriptive in many ways, and they represent norms and values and the principles of behavior of our tribes and families and all that. And once you want to be a member of these tribes, you have to subscribe. It's like when you try to sign up for a website of any kind, there's this terms and conditions. You have to check in. Yeah, I agree. I don't know how many people read those things.
No, yeah. Do you all the time?
I don't think I ever have. No. It's funny, because I was on a website, I won't say which one, and trying to contract with people, and I'm trying to get some job done, and it was just basic, some kind of work around, some creative work, and then I get this thing that says, you're in violation. I'm like, of what?
Of what?
Yeah, it's in our terms and conditions. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't read it. But anyway.
Yeah, but you did sign it.
Yeah, I did, exactly. We signed it. And then what did I think? I said, okay, I don't know if I want to be a member of this website anymore. And I think that's the reality in life as well. When you begin to become aware of how these expectations could be very directive and maybe in some cases, not all the time, rigid, then you have to make a choice whether you want to be part of that tribe. Yeah, part of that group.
Before we move on, because we right away start.
Yeah, I know this can go lots of places. So you have to hold me back.
No problem. No, that's no problem. But I would love to help the audience, also people who don't know you, to understand who Christopher is. And I have a question about that one. Who is Christopher? If we take out what you're doing. Because, we are at an event, the most boring question we can get asked is, and then almost people are looking at your name tag and the company name instead of writing your eyes and like, hey, but who are you or what do you do? And really interested. No, it sounds already transactional the moment it leaves their mouth. So let's try to do it differently. Who are you becoming? You gave an answer. But now, helping the audience better understand who is Christopher without explaining what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I think I'm just this young kid who wanted to live life in a way that was meaningful and happy. I think that I credit my parents with that. You grow up and, they're good parents, they're doing their best, they're not wealthy, but they're giving you what they can. And you realize that what they're giving you is actually a lot. You have shelter, you have food, you have love, you have education, you have family, you have friends, you get some parties every now and then. You get to drink Coca-Cola, which is exciting. Well, I should not be saying Coca-Cola on here. I'm not advertising Coca-Cola. I don't drink that much anymore.
It's my podcast, so it doesn't matter.
But you get the point. So he's like, okay, everything's good. And then, and as a kid, they're teaching you as best as they can, right from wrong, and all of those things. And I think I started to be aware, I'm not sure exactly when, but there's a point in my youth, I mean, we're talking under 10 years old, when you begin to become aware of, not everybody wants to do right, and that some people do wrong. And for me, that was like a major source of confusion. I'm not exactly sure when. I might have been 4 or 5. Just really confused by that. Say, oh, wow. So there's such a thing as not trying to do the right thing. And I think a lot of it, quite honestly, came from, we talked about Sierra Leone earlier, as the country is evolving. You hear your parents talk about things going on, talk about leaders. And then you kind of had this sort of pretty pristine view of leadership and adults, they're all doing the right thing, whatever that means. And you realize that, oh, wow, not everybody does the right thing, and a lot of leaders don't. So I think from that moment, as a young kid, you're thinking, oh, I'm gonna always do the right thing. And I'm going to try to get people to do the right thing. I'm going to teach people to do the right thing. I didn't know what that meant. But I think it generally meant that I became aware that we don't live in a perfect world, which was at that age a big shock. And not that my life was perfect, but I wasn't in dire straits for anything, and I'm fortunate for that. And we don't live in a perfect world, and moreover, I was making this resolve that I want to help create a world which is better. And in many ways, the way I tell that story, it's fundamentally, it's basic, it's weird, but in many ways, I think that's what I've been trying to do since then. And I don't know that I've succeeded in saying, I'm not trying to position myself as some, I'm not Martin Luther King or some person like that. That's not the point. I never had that consciousness. But I think in there somewhere, there was always this sense of, that's what you need to do. That's what you should always try to do. I think the story of my life is that I never really sat down and embraced that as a vocation, as a mission, with a lot of intentionality and focus. But it was kind of always there. And I think what happened in the last few years that made me sort of get into the phase that I'm in is when I started to more directly and open up and say, yeah, this is a thing that you've always been wanting to do with your life, but you never have. You now begin to listen and actually, more than listen, do something. And so that's it. So underneath all the this, that, banking, big jobs, there's always been this sense of unease and dissatisfaction, not just with the external environment, but dissatisfaction with the degree to which I was applying my own self towards the solution. Does that make sense? So that's why I don't know if that helps you, but
I hope
that's the story. That's the story.
That's the story.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, of course, your amazing book. You've written, Courage, and it's a deep dive into. I've said it. I've shared it with you. It's amazing to see how much a book is aligned in some sort of way with you as a person, but not make it about you. Yeah. Make it universal. Universal.
Yeah.
And you are unpacking courage in a beautiful way. So the 7 choices for living a life without regret. And that made me think about the question you asked me before we started into having our conversation, and it made me think about the book also. You've asked me the question about if I had ever an experience about discrimination, and that made me think about the book launch where C.O.U.R.A.G.E took the example of. At your first job at a bank, and then making fun or in some sort of way of your mother, and I hate myself for putting you in this situation that we get back to that point, but I believe that is part of why you are doing what you're doing right now. I strongly believe that, because if it's about regret, there something happened there which planted the seed, and maybe you can explain what happened at that moment, and because that really helps people to understand who you are and what path you are on right now, and why you've written that amazing book, which we will go into, of course, but it planted a seed deeply.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I like the descriptor of the book as amazing. I appreciate that. I do hope that it helps people in the way that I've tried to just be reflective of my own experiences and choices, situations, and how I manage them and how I handle them, because I have an instinct that lots of people have gone through some of those situations, and I hope that it can be helpful to them in that sense. So the story that you referred to was when I was an intern at an investment bank. I was likely around 21, 22, and was there for the summer and was in a situation with a group of gentlemen who I was working with for dinner, and people having dinner and they're talking and laughing and joking, and somehow the conversation becomes one about bare-breasted African women, and then somewhere out of nowhere, my mom's name is part of the conversation. And what I write about is I'm on the shock because I'm not expecting it, not in that context, not with those people. But then there's also this internal sort of reproach of my own reaction and what should I do. And then this bigger conversation of what's at stake, what would be the repercussion to me professionally, personally.
Consequences.
Yeah, consequences if I sort of take on this group of gentlemen. And I do not think, which is the story that I start the book with, and this lack of action made me feel a lot of disquiet for a long time. Because on one hand you have, going back to my parents, my mom, my parents, who had been this sort of selfless givers in many ways that I can never repay. And then you have a bunch of guys I work with who don't know them and now sort of using their name in that way. So it's really extremes in sort of the feeling of love and devotion on one hand, and then you have, who are you? You guys are offensive on the other hand. And I do nothing, which is sort of the way I approach this idea of what does courage mean? Is courage fighting and lashing out and standing up and doing something that you think is defensive for yourself or for your honor? Or is courage, or is it cowardice to do nothing and walk away? And I don't even define what the answer is, because I want it to be out there and for people to just reflect on it. And I use that as a big part of the story. While that is one story, that is in many ways the texture of the courage or fear experience. It always has something on one extreme and something else on the other extreme. Either something more rational or something more emotional, or vice versa. And you have to make a decision. And that decision either makes you feel really good about yourself, or in some cases it makes you feel regretful later. But never making a decision is not an option. Nobody wants to feel like they made the wrong decision. So, and it's not a question of right and wrong. The question I ask yourself, is it a courageous decision or is it a fearful one? And those are micro decisions. They can be micro, but lots and lots of them exist every single day in our lives. And the question ultimately, how many of those decisions we make one way or the other impacts how we feel. In many cases, it impacts real experiences that we have, positive or negative. And in some cases, it leaves us with a lot of regrets. And so that's the whole journey of the book, to really continue to unpack this idea of decisions and that could be pivot points in our lives, or decisions that could leave us feeling a sense of loss, a sense of unfulfillment, or a sense of regret for much longer. And how do you really make the right ones? And what is that path? And so I lay out sort of these 7 choices. I break this idea of courage into 7 choices, which are more environmental, in the sense that they're not about each one deciding to be courageous. No, but there are elements that impact who we are and how we live and how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world around us, and how we process. And all of those things, in my experience and in my research, together is what begins to shape us to the place where we can be more courageous, more consistently, and with the big things and the small things, and to do so with more impact, which I think is ultimately the goal that I had for myself, and I hope others also have for themselves.
Beautiful. And do you think that we've of course had a brief conversation about it? Do you believe that it's a sort of philosophy or methodology or sort of lens which you've created to look through life, or a sort of operating philosophy? We also touched upon that.
Yeah, I know. We talked about that. I think ultimately maybe it's a little bit of all of those things. I think everyone has different language that they use to describe these things. It's not a new human philosophy in that sense, but to the degree that I believe that courage is a fundamental trait with which we can do amazing things. Yeah, that is a mindset that I have. That's a philosophical grounding of how I operate now, and maybe have for some time, but sporadically and inconsistently, but now very grounded in that. And not that it can impact us in a very powerful way, but it is fundamental. Without it, you can't really do much else. And the reason why I really zero in on it even more than anything else is because it's not the thing that we talk about a lot when we are coaching people. I mean, I grew up in the business world and I've read all sorts of books. I've worked with all sorts of leaders and they're amazing people and they've all done great things. But when you're reading a lot of business books, I went to business school, you're talking about lots of things, the way you communicate and build a vision and how you can articulate and charisma and lots of other great things, which are all part and parcel of sort of the ingredients for business success. But it's not often that people talk about courage. And it's almost like people take it for granted. Yeah, we'll just do the right thing. No. A lot of times we know what to do, we know how to do it, but we end up not doing it. And I see that all the time. So there's something that happens, even when you have all these big degrees and power and wealth and the ability
all the
to...
ingredients.
All the ingredients. You can get a military at your disposal and still not be courageous. So it's an interesting thing that we... So I wanted to... And I also joined myself as I was thinking about sort of what my personal operating model would be going forward, is to find the one thing. So I didn't want to sit here and come up and be like, yeah, I'm going to be all about these things. And I'm going to, what is the one thing that I'm going to hold myself to? And what is the one thing that I'm going to make be part and parcel of every single message I communicate every single time I open my mouth? And it was a deliberate choice. I wanted it to be one thing. So I wanted it to be something that was real, impactful, and fundamental. And that's how I got to Courage. And it's interesting. Then you keep on reading and you're like, and going back to my discomfort with the word philosophy, then you're like, oh, wow. Some other people had said this exact same thing. Maya Angelou more recently said so. And if you go back to even the Greek philosophers, they talk about, fundamental virtues. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not a Greek philosopher, but man, I'm happy that Aristotle and I are on the same page on this stuff.
We had also the conversation about do you necessarily need to be the inventor of the philosophy, or can you apply it and be a philosopher also?
I think even better, it's not even applying it. Even better is to come to it, through your own process, your own life experience, your own exercise of self-awareness, your own exercise of honesty, your own exercise of virtuous intent. I mean, I think it's beautiful when you come to it and then you read back and read other people's work and it's like, yeah, I agree. And that's how, interestingly, I started to decide who I wanted to meet. Because if I ran into people or read their work, I'm like, I want to meet this guy. I want to talk to this guy. Because this guy has gone through something, maybe similar, maybe identical to mine, I don't know. But he or she is articulating something that I feel, not just something I'm reading, but something I feel. Yeah. And it was funny as I was going through the book and kind of decide who my endorsements were. I wasn't looking for, what's the biggest, most impressive name I can find? No. I was like, who are people who, when they speak, and they might not be speaking about courage, they're just speaking about their own areas of focus or expertise, whatever that is. But the assumptions and some of the concepts that they are using and articulating were very connected to how I was thinking and feeling. I'm like, okay, that's the guy I want to read my book because I want to know what they think. I identify with them and where they are. And I think we can do things together.
Let's find your definition before we start unpacking a little bit more about the courage and why 7 episodes and why. What is your definition of courage?
Yeah, in a nutshell, courage is the ability to act in spite of the risks that we face, or the fears or the risks that we face, and maybe it's not the exact same definition I use in the book, but it's pretty close. In the book, I actually added something else in service of a virtuous intent or motive or mission. And the reason why I packaged that is because, once I started to understand that courage has this component of there's a goal and there's a risk to achieving that goal or furthering that goal. And even more specific than risk, there's a risk to you or real fear that you feel. Whether it's a real risk or imagined risk that comes in the form of fear, it doesn't matter. But that's you and that's goal, and there's something you need to break through to get there. And by breaking through, you expose yourself to this risk, or you have to somehow take on this fear. And it doesn't happen if you don't act. It's not a thing that happens in your head. So you got to jump in the game and actually do the action. So the action is really important. So you start to pull all these things. So it's a goal, it's a risk, it's fear, it's action, but you do it anyway. And then they begin to understand, okay, what puts one in the place where one can move forward and pursue something in spite of these sort of barriers or obstacles in the way. And that's what courage is. It's not bravery. We use bravery interchangeably a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that, or bold. But the element of thinking through that set of choices and acting is what I think makes courage kind of interesting. Because there's walking across the canal, I could see a baby drowning, and maybe I can't even swim. I'll jump in there and try to see if I can save the baby. And that's fine. And there's some amount of all of that lives in the bravery category. Mm-hmm. It's impulsive, it's instinctive, adrenaline pumps, you just do what you gotta do. You can't even say why.
High risk, high impact.
Yeah, you can't even say why, I just did it, and you make the 6 o'clock news. Good, and there's nothing wrong with that. But courage is a slightly different thing, that it's more deliberative and thoughtful. It's not rash, it's not reckless. It has this deliberation. And the deliberation does see and acknowledge the risk, does feel the fear, but then rationally or irrationally, well, rationally, because it's deliberate, makes this decision to move forward and act. And so that's kind of an interesting one. I know if I walk there, if I do this, I'm going to go to jail. And I've processed all of that, and I'm going to do it. The U.S. civil rights movement is kind of a great example of that. Or many of those people who got killed. Abraham Lincoln, after, end the Civil War, bam, gets shot. That's courage, because you know what's going on. You know what you're dealing with, but you do it anyway. So those are the elements that are important to think of when you think about courage, and that's what I define as the ability to act in the face of risk or fear, and do it anyway. And it's even more challenging when you are not the beneficiary of that action. And that's kind of what it's going, okay, it's in service of this virtuous concept. I'm doing it for my people. I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for justice. I'm doing it for the people who are disadvantaged. I have no direct way to benefit, but it stands so large in my sense of impact and virtue that I'm going to do it anyway. That is a whole different level. And that's why I added in the definition, this notion of virtuous intent.
What are moments besides that specific moment in time which we have talked about around the joking around your mother about your mother? What are specific other moments in life, if you look back, where courage is challenged? Your courage is challenged.
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. All the time, I think, maybe they're not all as big and dramatic as some of the stories I talk about in the book. But I think wherever you find that tension, where you have and what you'd like to realize, but that realization of that goal comes with a risk, or comes with your deep sense of fear because you perceive that you're going to lose something, or potentially lose something, but you have to do it anyway, kind of begin to meet that definition. And virtuous is kind of an interesting one because it's not always about what you do to impact others. it's virtuous if it's all about your own sense of becoming, like we said. Because you are also an individual in the universe who has a right to live. Mm-hmm. You have a right to dream. You have a right to aspire. You have a right to be who you can be, as long as the things that you're aspiring to are not necessarily coming at other people's expense deliberately. You know, that's a different conversation. But it's nefarious. But if it's not nefarious, you have a right to that. And so if I go somewhere and, you know, I'm ill-treated just because I'm there, I have a right to assert myself. I have a right to claim my own citizenship in that space. And yes, even that could come with some risk. Well, I might not be invited back. I'm going to offend people, you know, but you have a right to just say it. And as, you know, a Black African man who's getting to my mid-50s, there's been a lot of things, you know, and not just things to do with race, but just to do with life, where you have to assert yourself with some, knowing that, okay, I'm going to be disinvited. After this, I'm going to come back. Okay, fine. But I am going to have to hold my ground and claim my space and be courageous in spite of what could be. So at work, you know, lots of situations at the personal level, you know, in defense of your team, choices that we make. I did strategy for a living, you know, even trying to build strategy for an organization. What are we building for? Are we building for the organization to do what it's supposed to do? Or are we building for leaders to be successful and get big bonuses? Even in those contexts, you have to make some of these choices. So, well, yeah, we can do that. We'll make money, but it's not the organization's best interest to do that. And so even in those conversations with work, I had to put my foot, you know, hold ground in different places, because you can see where the divergence is happening. And, well, you're not a team player. Well, I'm not a team player because you can get your next boat, or I'm not a team player because I'm hurting the organization. You know, so those are all the kinds of things that you face, especially as you grow up in the corporate world.
Mm. Especially at the level where you work.
Yeah, it's a good senior. I mean, these are some of the choices, because you can see why people want to do things, and you understand that. But I said, no, but here's what the organization is supposed to do. Here's what's good for the organization, not what's good for the next press release that makes you look good and puts you on a different career path.
Did that help you to decide to leave corporate world?
Absolutely.
That was one. Those intersections or those crossroads of making the decision.
Absolutely. Mm. Yeah, because there was a lot going on again. Like I said, I'm going through this personal thing of, okay, what's my value? Mm-hmm. Then I'm realizing, well, I'm here lending all of these talents, all of these skills to the fork of the road that I don't want to be on. And to benefit a bunch of people who are taking that fork in the road. And I'm going to take my talents back, and I think I'm going to go find another, you know, path to go down, where I think I know I can be of more impact, where I can help organizations, I can help people, I can help create outcomes, I can help create more hope, I can help create opportunities. Not that I don't want to do well, that's not the point. I want to do well, but I want to do it in a way that doesn't come with this sense of loss or this sense of regret.
No, not just for me. Not at the cost of society, but at...
That's my point exactly. Not just for me, but for society. Yeah. Because I did, in my very diverse career, also get to know that you don't have to, you can do good and do well at the same time. And I don't know where it's come from, where there's this zero-sum game mentality that it's either this or that. It's not.
It doesn't necessarily have to be.
It doesn't have to be that way. No. And I think even if it's that way, that's an opportunity for us to completely reconfigure how these organizations and systems work, so they can be fit for purpose. They can do what they're supposed to do, which is do well, because yet some people have made investments and they owe a return on that investment, but also, you know, do good in terms of respecting the people who help us all do well and giving them their own fair share, giving them more to live for and giving them what they need to build and become in their own right, with their own families and with their own situations. And we cannot do that at the same time.
No.
And there are lots of businesses that are trying to do that. But I think there's probably not enough. There's a lot, maybe some might say even more, that feel if you are doing well, by definition, I need to be unhappy with that because you're taking something from me. And I think it's part of the mindset that today governs too much of what we see happening around us every single day, which I think is a massive opportunity. And so one of the soapboxes I stand on, because I'm still engaged with businesses, I'm still engaged with brands, is brands have the power to do a lot of good things, and do it at the same time. Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So that was kind of the tension that I ultimately made me feel like I'm going to work a different way with my talents and take a different decision, different direction in terms of what my tribe is, and find a new tribe. Versus,
and your tribe was then the corporate world.
By and large, because you
who's your tribe now?
My tribe now is people who are talented and open-minded, because there's just not a whole lot today that we know for sure. The only thing that we know for sure is the values and the principles upon which we're grounded. That's one thing I want to know for sure. That's not something I just sit and trade every single day. I think I'm pretty clear what I want my name to be associated with, what I want my gifts to be associated with.
What do you want to be associated with?
Something that leaves people better off than when I met them. Everyone's on a path. I don't know that I can get you to your destination, but if I can help you take a few steps forward that you might not have been able to take without me, I want to feel that way.
Help them transform.
Yeah.
Help people transform.
That's why. Transformation. It starts little by little. There's a big transformation, big dramatic, revolution, but much of the time it's an evolution. Like many of us and our lives, we're evolving. And I want to, as you're coming in and out of someone's life, you don't want to be the force that takes them back 10 steps. You want to be the force that moves them forward. So that's where the principle is. That's why I know that's what I want to be doing. But then I do feel like the world is very complex for different reasons. Technology has changed a lot of how we think about the world. The world people are getting more and more knowledgeable.
At least I think.
More aware. At least we hope so. Yeah.
I hope so.
But a one-sided world has existed for much of the last few centuries. That's not the same. No. You got a wave of independence, you got countries, you got smart people all around the world trying to figure out things. And that's unleashing a lot of creativity. So it's hard to say, I know the one answer to anything. You almost have to mine a lot of perspectives and then pick the one that makes sense for the right set of environments. And
what feels good for you.
What feels good for, yeah. So I like, my tribe is finding people who appreciate that. We're not dogmatic. I know the only way.
No,
I know you don't know the only way. And if that's how you think, you're going to close yourself off to too many things. So I'm sorry, I can't work with that because I still want to be exposed to things that I don't know. So I'm all into finding people who have the talents that they can bring to the table, but are open to learn new ones and open to enhance other conversations that are already happening, and very grounded in these principles of virtuous impact, with which, when you bring all together in great partnership, amazing things can happen. So it's a very loose set of ideas, but I see it, I know it when I see it. So I pick my associations now largely with that in mind.
What did your beautiful also, because we can't ignore it, and people who are looking you up, getting curious and see on your LinkedIn, of course, what you've did all in your career. What in your beautiful, amazing career did you learn most about yourself?
Well, interesting you say so. I learned more than anything else, and it took a while because I think at the very early part of my career, I'm focused on just being knowledgeable, which once upon a time we thought that was a good thing. And what I realized is that I don't know everything. I know that's kind of a cliche. Everybody says, yeah, you know that. But for me, once I realized that was like the most amazing part. Because I saw how when I was part of organizations where partnerships were created and people were coming together, amazing things happen. I saw how in my own unique, specific experience, if I was trying to solve something, if I had a great team, I had great input, I was able to do way beyond what I expected. And I think the conversation that all of that leads one to is the power of diversity. And people, it's this label now, I don't know, it's kind of sickening.
Why so?
The label that we've made into some toxic concept. It's like just crazy. Nature, growing up even as a young kid, maybe 10, 11, 12, doing biology, you understand and appreciate that what makes it all work is the diversity of it. So that's biological. And I saw it. I mean, what are the chances that you can put a problem in front of me today and I on my own can just solve it? Or if I found 3 other people who were my best friends, but have had more or less the same kind of life trajectory that I have had, are also going to just sit here and solve it. It's ridiculous to assume that's the case. Even if we came up with an answer, that may not be a solution. Those are 2 different things. An answer and a solution are 2 different things. An answer is just I offered you this thing back. A solution is I'm offering you something that's adding value, that actually moves the conversation forward. So today we have a lot of answers, lots of answers in the world. But I don't know that we have solutions. Climate change, you name it. War and peace, equality. Everybody has an answer, but we don't have solutions. And the path to great solutions, in my experience, if there's one thing I learned, is that I don't definitely have all the solutions. I may have an answer, but what really gets you great solutions is diversity. Lots of people coming together, lots of perspectives, lots of lived experiences. Again, I'm preaching to the choir. But sometimes we need to keep saying that because
but it's also
not as understood as we think that it is.
No, true. But it's also interesting that you mentioned that it's so sickening that we're talking about, and that's almost toxic. Why is it for you that feeling of toxic when we're talking about diversity? Well, we both agree it's nature, and we have to embrace and accept and try to leverage in a positive way. But why for you has it also a sort of sickening?
I think somewhere at the base of all of that, I think, at least for me, maybe I'm biased, it takes me back to this conversation around courage. Because you learn and you grow. You once used to believe this, and now you believe something else. And that growth takes courage. You have to leave a state of what was familiar, and you have to take on something that is not as familiar. Sometimes it's people who are not familiar. Sometimes it's ideas that are not familiar. But you have to traverse this state of comfort to this state of discomfort and take on the risk of either not knowing as much as you thought you know, appearing not to know, or feeling like you're ignorant, which you're not. It's okay not to know. Or the risk of failure because you try new things. So I think that is part of the conversation around courage. So this backlash around diversity is, to some degree, is reacting to something that's new or different that I might not be comfortable with, that I might have experience with. And really not understanding that thing could be new to you. But in the same way that you're very comfortable with yourself and everything else around you, and is familiar. In the same way, that other person is also really comfortable with themselves and everything else that's familiar. So you thinking they're strange is you thinking they're strange. They don't think they're strange any more than you accept that you are strange relative to them. So we all have to bridge this gap of where we're comfortable and stepping into this place where we're uncomfortable. How
would your proposal be if you have to design the change you want to see in that one given at school? What would your proposal look like?
Well, I think it's interesting you say so, because the 7 ideas that I talk about, if you don't mind me.
Yeah, of course.
The very first one is having a sense of, committing to a purpose. Let's just say in the middle there is this idea that...
That's the C of courage.
Yeah, we have a sense of purpose. We have something that we want to happen. Some shared aspiration. And then we can go through the 7. The other one is then see yourself as an owner. Own that aspiration. See yourself as somebody who has some responsibility to make it happen. Because you can have the purpose, but if you don't relate to it up, it's the other guy's problem, then it's of no use to you. Number 3 is fear will set in, because now you have to begin to, now that you own it, now the pressure's on. And then that's where all the voices start to chirp in your head about
your inner critic.
Yeah, you're not ready. Who are you to do it? It's too hard. Don't do it now. You can do it later.
That's the little voice I heard when I stepped into the podcast scene. That was for months.
I'm sure.
For months. And you're not good enough, and who's going to care listening to your podcast, and what kind of questions are you asking, and why should people care listening to the podcast? And
Exactly.
That's
exactly.
feeling.
And you have to manage to that. And there are ways
you don't
to do
come across yourself as a person who has that inner voice. Do you have that inner voice?
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a whole different podcast.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, and you don't, not only do you not have those, not only do you have those fears, but the 4th point is they could also be amplified by the environment that you're in. So you have these voices, other people who, even if you didn't have the fear, might give it to you, or if you had it, might make it even worse. So again, part of managing through courage is, not just understanding that you have to deal with the fear, but it's also kind of, stifle these negative voices that only make things worse. And then, and then you have to then begin to understand that as you go through this process, there's no better substitute than acting. So you have to be ready to act. You can't be courageous in your head. You're going to make it have impact. You're going to make it real. And that acting now puts you in a situation where you can make mistakes. You might fail, might make mistakes. I use mistakes. Fail is a strong word, because it's not a one-way street. You can always come back and address and fix something that didn't work out the first time. And so that whole process, it gets you to the purpose, managing, owning your potential, and sort of being in the driver's seat, working with fear, listening to these voices and managing them and making sure that they don't sort of drown out your ambition or your aspiration, acting, recovering from failure, all important. But none more important than knowing how to stay in the game long term. Because courage is this journey. It can grind you down. You can get disillusioned. And I'm just going to go back to the old life when I was just not worried about it. I was just staying right in the center of the lane, not taking any risks, and just going to be happy, get paid, have a nice house, do all the things I'm supposed to do. Don't worry about being special. Don't agitate for any other thing other than just mainstream success. So that's the endurance and the part of it. So all of those things are, and that's how you that's a prescription ultimately to taking on pretty much all of these challenges. And by the way, you won't sit down and run through a checklist in 10 seconds. the idea of courage, I think, is to build these as elements of your personality and go on that journey where you're working on these skills and you have this sense of awareness of where you are at the start, and you're pushing yourself to test things out, try things, evolve, be more consistent, and hopefully it becomes a new sort of imprint of your behavior pattern, and not necessarily things that you never try, you never do. Because when you are in the moment and you have to make a courageous choice, all of these elements is what gets you there. And if none of them are in place, then you're just going to I'm just going to walk away, because that's for Spartacus, or that's for Rambo, that's not for me. I'm going to go be me. And I think the sad thing is that then you lose this power that you have to make that impact.
Which one of the 7 elements is the most work in progress for you?
The most work in progress for me. I think, that's an interesting one. I'm normally asked which one is the most important one if you have to pick one. And I always say, reject the voices, because just don't be emotionally independent of the noise around you.
Yeah, but it comes easy for you. That comes relatively. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
it has become easier.
Easier, yeah, because you come across as very focused and very selective in what you allow to come into your orbit.
Yes.
But maybe it's training, eh? So that can be that. So I know you only for less. No, I think a little bit more than a year, but it can be training.
Yes, some of it is training.
Yeah.
Some of it is reflection. Yeah. Again, self-awareness is important, and then intentionality. Yeah. You're just really pushing yourself to go into that place where I'm not very comfortable here, but I'm just gonna go anyway. I think the one that I need to work on is growing from failure, because I think that is connected to our desire to be excellent.
When is it a failure?
It's a failure when you don't learn.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a failure that it happened.
So did you ever made a failure? Be honest, because you are a person of learning and growing. It's in your whole DNA.
Yeah.
So when did you make a mistake and you didn't learn anything about it?
Oh, you didn't learn anything about it?
Yeah.
I think when I was younger, it happened all the time. I think now I'm less so, because now I'm trying to find the learning.
Yeah.
Man, for me, a lot of it is just in personal relationships. As we say, sometimes you take your ball and you go home. You are in a situation with someone, maybe they did something, maybe you did something, it doesn't matter, you all did something, and I'm just going to leave, and you walk off and you don't want to talk to them anymore, and a perfectly great relationship just stops because you were too full of your own sense of, it's not me, it's them, and ego, and you just walk away. I think I might have destroyed a bunch of relationships like that when I was growing up. The only way, but if you want to pick up one thing that was chronic, because you kind of have this sense of ego, it's my way or the highway, and therefore I walk away. I'm not saying sometimes you don't have to walk away.
Yeah, but different. But
different. You gotta have
it's not about out of ego. It's more maybe out of protection.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it's not worth your time and your effort, and
exactly
to stay involved in something which is not working for you. So
exactly, I think that's. And the reason I go personal is because with work, you learn that doesn't work at work. I can be in an office where I screwed up and they say, what did you learn? And I say, nothing. I'm like, okay, man, you're not going to be here too long. So I think in many ways on the professional side is easier. Because you can't show up and something happens and they say, what are the learnings? You say, no, we good. It was that guy's fault, not me.
It's always another.
Yeah, and some people do it in the work environment, and I always think that's the craziest thing to even say. Like, it's all that guy's fault. I was good, So for me, I think I learned very quickly that that's not how I'm going to succeed professionally. And I've been lots of things, but professionally, I think I was clued into some of the choices to make. But in personal life, where you feel like you can get away with it, it's why I feel like that's probably been more of an issue, because you're like, yeah, whatever. You just leave and I leave, And you don't be more reflective. You don't get to the point where you can go back and say, all right, sorry, I messed up there. And I know you don't like that, or I know I did this wrong, not going to happen anymore. I think the times in my life when I was more flippant about, I'll walk away. Yeah.
Christopher, and what is the role of courage? Because it's Journeys of Empowerment, it's about you, and that's also why I'm asking this question: is what role does courage play in terms of marriage?
Yeah, I think it does. It's a really good question. And marriage is one kind of this bigger thing, which let's just call it relationships, that has its own unique, obviously, definition. And so, but I think courage comes into play with all of these contexts, especially and because of what we're trying to protect, which is this we call it protect ourselves, but it's actually ego. And that has deep roots into our own psyche and our own upbringing, how fragile or how vulnerable that ego is, and to what lengths we will go to protect it. And we can be so focused on that job of protecting it that we are not open to anything else. And ultimately, that obsession alone can make us a whole lot less courageous, because we're not even looking at the opportunities. We're not looking at the possibilities. You just looking at this thing here. I just want to protect it. Stay away from it. Don't touch it. Don't look at it. Don't drop it. So I think in marriage, that's important. You always have to put this thing out there, open it up with all its weirdness and strangeness, and then so you can then and let someone else see it, and then together hopefully you both, if it's marriage, you both sort of putting this thing on the table, and you can both then have a very honest conversation about not just what's fragile or frail, but about what's strong and powerful about that, and how that can help you get to the other place.
And courage and raising children?
Same thing to some degree. The children element is an interesting one, because that comes with this idea of love and what we think love is. And I don't have the answers here. I'm gonna wing this for a second with you. And the love part is you want them to grow up and be great adults and successful in their own way, and some of the mistakes that you've made, and you want to protect them from the worst experiences that you can. And so what you begin to do sometimes is you either begin to teach them everything you know, and it goes back to that knowing thing, which is a kind of a benign idea. Sometimes it could be quite dangerous, because what do I know? Well, I know what I've lived, I know what I've learned, and there's a fine balance between teach them what I've learned versus
and what you think you know.
Just tell them what I know.
Yeah, and what you think you know.
What I think I know, exactly. But that's kind of where we go. We want to do what I know. So that's
it is like it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is also then you want to protect. And that again limits their own experiences, it limits the possibilities, it limits the testing, the trial, the error, the failing or the mistakes, and the recovery that is part of that growing process. And then the other part is this focus then on you want them to do well, so you want them to be excellent. And then the problem with the excellence idea is that it gets you closer and closer to perfection, and which is that you kind of make it sort of a pristine, clean experience that doesn't have any warts or disfigured in any way. And now you're moving towards trying to be perfect, and that's, I think, is the worst thing you can try to get your kids to be.
No, it's illusion anyway. It's illusion anyway.
Even for you, yeah.
Even for you,
it's like crazy. Like, and I know sometimes that's how you made a mistake. Oh, it's not great, and then you get obsessed with all the small things, and you lose out of the big picture. So I think courage. So it takes a lot of courage to raise kids. whether it's what you teach them, whether it's what you expose them to.
And if you are in the amount of openness, what they teach you.
Yes, exactly. And to also understand that their presence, especially when they're young and they're a lot more open and curious and adventurous and like to explore, can you follow versus lead?
Okay, turn it around.
Yeah, because
how easy are you on following?
Yeah, better than I used to. Yeah, because part of, again, goes back to the training thing, and part of the training is that, well, you want to show up and be a strong leader, and there are environments still today that think a leader looks a certain way, and you can be vulnerable. You cannot not know. You cannot not have an answer and a great perfect answer which is flawless. And we buy into that construct. And again, go back to those business books we talked about earlier, a lot of them kind of frame things up in this very obtuse way. So if that's what you buy into, that notion of what leadership is, I mean, that's a rough path when you're trying to actually lead real people or have real impact, especially as the world is getting more and more complex. So I've had to, again, some of you from work, some of you from trial and error, definitely my personal life as well, understand this idea of followership. And how kids also are a massive mirror to that, which I came to late. I'm like, oh man, have I screwed my kids up? Oh geez, I should have let them do more things, because you try to orchestrate and then you realize that, no, that was them actually leading. And a lot of times you'll see, I have a friend who was one of the endorsers of my book who talks about the value of play and how play, which is such a healthy thing that kids go through because it's so uninhibited. As adults, we don't play as much, and we took everything.
Unfortunately,
we take everything a little bit too seriously, and that's a perfect area where we can follow. When I was in a company once that had a brilliant idea, they had this idea of taking all the young kids who just joined the company, and they were in maybe their low 20s, and they would have these big executive leadership sessions where the young people would come in and lead the conversation. And we would have reverse mentoring. Because what the organization was trying to do was to connect, all these guys who know in the corner offices with the young kids who are essentially our consumers who have a different perspective. And it was an amazing experience for the organization. Again, so that's courage in business. As a leader, you have to let go of that notion of being in your own private elevator up to your own corner suite and you don't talk to any of the people in the organization. The ability to be in touch with yourself and comfortable with yourself, for you to be vulnerable, engage young people, hear back from them. It takes courage, because in your mind you think you're going to lose something. Oh, they wouldn't respect me, or I don't want them that close to me because I won't look that importance to them. So that's your own fears playing, but you can deal with that in your own way. But the point is, the opportunity to be that kind of a leader will unlock so much for the organization.
Well, we're heading a little bit towards the end of our conversation for today. What is the role of courage? What was the role of courage in writing your book?
Interesting. I think I say commit to a purpose is one of the biggest motivators. And so once I did all the early thinking and I felt that courage, because I first explored courage for myself before I decided to write about it. It was after I had done all this thinking that I became a little bit more confident, because of what I was exploring and discovering for myself, that, wow, this is something that could be a love letter to my kids. This could be a letter to all young people. This could be a love letter to people who are struggling in different ways. And then I said, oh, wow, then I just write a book and tell them. But the number one thing was getting to that point of realization that this could be an unlock This could be a helpful transforming perspective. And so
that's a beautiful way to put it. Sorry to interrupt, but
absolutely.
That's a beautiful way. What did you say?
Yeah.
A transforming, helpful, transforming
perspective.
Perspective. Yeah. Maybe that's in a way the methodology, philosophy, and everything in place, right? That's what you.
Because I wanted it to have impact.
Yeah.
So that became, and that was clear. There was no debate in my head that this is something I wanted to communicate.
It was the purpose.
And so that was purpose. The purpose is to get this out there. So now that is the goal, and that's why that's important for courage, because without a deep sense of purpose, it's hard to be courageous. I always say courage needs something to work for. Because when you managing all this idea of risk and fear, you're not going to put yourself out there unless the thing that you put yourself out there matters in some way.
Yeah, you're going to balance it constantly.
Yeah. Risk reward, exactly. And so once you position that aspiration in some ways as the reward, that's what I'm working for, then you can take on the risk. So that was the first thing. And then it's all the elements of, like you mentioned, starting your podcast. Am I qualified to write a book? Who's going to read it? Do I have the time? I procrastinate?
Perfection and procrastination is also closely attached to each other.
With failure and perfection, with some people motivating you, some people not. Some people just
discourage you.
Downright, I was going to say, exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. Some people just outright discouraging you. And that happens. And you want to listen to the guy who's discouraging you. You want to listen to, it's not going to be perfect, so I wouldn't bother to write it. And you never get to the point where you start. But once you started to write it, and then you're flowing, and that's the virtue and the benefit of acting. Once you're in the game, then it takes on a life of its own. Because now your mind's flowing and your fingers are writing in different ways. And you getting into it, you developing your own sense of excitement. And then you sort of go through it. So yes, the whole arc from
initial
thoughts that said this is a thing I want to get out, all the way to hang in there and get it done and really enjoy the process, because I think there's a joyful set of experiences here. Just really, and even till today, the book's out and hearing people talk about it, it still is a big source of joy, not just the writing, but even today. So yeah, it plays out the arc completely.
The book has a lot of transformational potential. It is unlocking. It made me cry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Multiple times. No, you don't have to. I love to cry, so I don't care. No, really, because
I like how you say so. It's nice, but I'm interrupting you. But
no, but
loving to cry and loving to dance, two important things.
Yeah, it is, and because it in a way it releases something, it resonates. So, did you have one specific, and I'm asking this because I'm on the verge to write a book. And the question comes also out of personal curiosity. Did you have one specific type of reader in mind when you were writing the book? Or the most important person you were writing it for? If you have,
yeah,
because it's so universal, of course.
Yes.
But on the other hand, if you maybe ask it differently, if you could wish for at least one type of person to read it, who would that be? What type of person do you think needs courage to read Courage the most?
It's a really good question. Really good point. And you can't answer the first one of the answers I'm going to give to you, which is it's universal. But I like the challenge to be specific, and that is young people. People who are in that college age, seeing the decade of the 20s, you sort of coming off
puberty, the adolescence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This point where your parents have been very involved and helping you manage to all of your choices.
Scaffolding everything.
Scaffolding, exactly. Safety nets and all those things. And you're now sort of going into the world and exploring it and seeing the beauty of it, and in some ways, dealing with some of the parts of it that you might not have been exposed to, and trying to make sense of all of that. And in a way, maybe that is even more complicated for them, people in their 20s, that is, today, than it was for people like us when we had that same sort of age category. Yeah. For them to not lose a sense of their own agency. Because the last thing I want anyone to feel, and I think more so than anytime else in history, is losing sense of agency. Losing sense of the fact that I am the savior that I need. There's no other deity or being or person's going to flap in here on their wings and come save you. It ultimately has to be you. But there's work to do to put yourself in that driver's seat. Self-awareness, clarity, just a sense of collaboration, but at the same time, independence.
Yeah, and autonomy.
Yeah, there's so much that needs to come to. So for me, that's if there's one group, because they are the future.
It is.
That's sort of see people at my age are kind of, we just done and wasted, just put us out to pasture. But I do feel like this book speaks to people who are making the decisions that I'm making now, mid-late career. I do feel like it helps people who are mid-career trying to find their own self. What is my personal leadership identity? Where do I need to work on things that I might not have been working on before? I think that's important. But if all three stages, from that young, middle, and sort of late career stage, if there's one, if I were to pick, it'll be the people who I think are custodians of a future that has been handed to them that is less than, it's complicated. And I think they're going to need everything that they have. More than anything else, it's self of agency and their own ability to make an impact. One at a time. Courage is contagious, and in that way they will impact and strengthen and inspire not just each other, but lots of us who, maybe set it on ways and maybe need to give that young, upcoming leadership group some ability to lead before they're as jaded and as cynical as maybe some of us are.
Of course, we know all that looking in the future is impossible, and going back in time is impossible. The only time we have is now. With the lived experience, after writing the book, let's say I can make it possible that we get in a time capsule and we go back to you as intern, back to that dinner, with all the lived experience and written the book. What would you whisper in the ears of the young Christopher at that moment when that happened at the table?
I will remind myself that, life is a marathon. And especially in that context, in that moment, no matter what I did there was not going to derail my life. I think at the time, you're so in the thing, you feel like you want to nail the landing. And the landing in that case was get a Wall Street job. And that was the biggest thing. Now you look back, and I went to Wall Street. I didn't even care for it that much. After a while, I said, this is just not my thing. I left. By the time I didn't know that. So I think what I want to whisper is, staying true to yourself and standing on this muscle firmly of independence, of articulating with conviction what it is that you are, what you stand for, what your boundaries are. You know, that's what I would have reminded myself. I didn't understand any of that at that time. None of that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Christopher.
Thank you for asking.
Truly enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
And I can highly recommend, and yes, I'm biased, I can highly recommend the book. It's universal applicable. So,
I hope so.
I enjoyed it. So one of my best friends, Remco, which you will meet anytime soon.
All right.
Remco is now reading the book.
Oh, good.
And I will order some copies for my friends
Thanks.
for Christmas. So thank you very much for joining.
Yeah, no, thanks for the conversation.
And I think this is only the starting point.
I think so.
I would wish for.
Yes. There's a lot to unwrap, and there's a lot to work with. Like I said earlier, I think we have a lot to work with that we don't use. And I'm looking forward to that.
There's maybe one thing.
Sure.
There's maybe one more thing.
Absolutely, we can do two more.
No, that is the role of. And we briefly touched upon it, the role of joy into courage.
Yes.
Because if I look at the 7 chapters, then you see at the last, you see joy between...
In parentheses.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I brought joy in late, and I could not create a whole joy chapter.
No.
I actually did, but then it was too much, so I had to.
Yeah.
No, because and the reason why it fit nicely there was because, like I said, the last of the 7 choices is really the choice to be resilient and to embody and live out that resilience, which is now, it's last chapter for a reason. It's at the point where you are so in charge of your situation, you know, that you can just be at a different plane because the world's hitting you every which way, but you kind of have your own. And Maya Angelou might have said this, I think it's attributed to her. And I understand what she meant. She said something like, you know, you need to learn how to act like nothing bothers you. You know, and it's not that nothing bothers you. That's not what she's saying. But you're not going to get derailed by every little thing. And the resilience is a big part of that. So that in that chapter, I was also saying, okay, how do you get there, that longevity? And I had to go back and now really think about very specific people who I thought were courageous and see what were the common elements of those people. And the one thing that I came away remembering and identifying and remembering from all of them is that I never found any of them boring. I never found any of them people that I did not want to meet again, because each time I had an interaction with them and I left with a very positive feeling. So there's something about what they do, how they do it, that communicates optimism, positivity, like can-do-ness, joy.
Yeah. That fits it perfectly.
And I realized that it had to do with how they saw the world, as how they saw their situation in the world as well. No matter what their situation was, they felt grateful for what they had. And because they felt grateful, they were always in a state of giving. And they were always in a state of generosity. So they feel grateful, therefore they're generous. They're generous and they give by choice, optimism, positivity, and joy. And so they're emanating all of this good stuff. And that's what you get when you're around them. But what is also interesting for them is that it makes you now want to come back and engage with them. It makes you want to be supportive of them. And in many ways, I saw that approach de-risking the world for them, because they've lowered their own risk. And it's not intentionally. I think it's just how it works. The world is a lot less risky for them because they have generated positivity and joy. And people want to give it back to them. You know, think of
So
someone
it's
walks in.
reciprocal.
Yeah, somebody walks in here today and they rude and obnoxious and they shut people down and then on the way out they slip and fall. That happens in the public place. What are people going to do? They're all going to laugh. The guy came in, he was rude and nasty, now he slips on ice, now he's falling. Yeah. That's how people will react. But imagine someone came in and they were positive, engaging, giving, helpful, and they slip and fall. It's not funny. Everyone's going to run over there to pick them up. Are you okay? It's the same thing. So I think joy becomes this very powerful, element that if we understand what it is and how we can embrace it and give it out, in many ways, we're going to create an environment where we are de-risking our own lives. We can be more courageous because there's more people who are rooting for us. There's more people, the environment is rooting for us. I'm not saying all the risk goes away. I'm not saying all the fear goes away. I'm simply saying when we worry about failure, perfection, all that stuff, ego, you're not as stressed about that stuff as much because there's just all this positive elements or elements that are there supporting you. But at the core of that is this notion of gratitude and generosity.
And joy.
Yeah, and joy.
I believe there's maybe something sort of thing to discover. But I'm not planting. It's trying to plant the seed. But I'm curious. There's something. What's happening when you are talking about joy that is not answered enough.
Mm-hmm.
In my belief.
Probably.
So I will.
Yeah,
I
probably.
think I'm thinking out loud. I can simply imagine maybe in future a book about joy.
Maybe. There's definitely, because like I said, it came late in this process.
Yeah.
There's a lot, I think about kindness. We talked about it earlier. Yeah. There's a lot there, which is all in keeping with what you can control, what we can control. We want to be these beings and these people who have all this impact on the world. And a lot of the training that many of us go through is focused on that thing and fixing it and making it better. What I'm finding and what I found out and what I've been finding out and just getting more and more, part of how I am is if you go back and you turn the tables a little bit and you work on yourself in a very authentic, passionate, honest, meaningful way, and then you let sort of that journey not just be something that you bottle up inside, but let that journey still come back and bubble out of you and let people see you in this process. It could be messy, doesn't matter. That is ultimately the power that you need and that others need for you to now impact them in the way that you wanted to impact them. So it's an interesting set of data points to connect, but I'm really getting into understanding that that's where the work is. I mean, it's kind of late in the game, but I'm still, I got no work to do. Yeah. I agree. So,
you just began. You're just in
warming. So it's kind of fun.
To be honest, you are just in warming up stage. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Yeah, so you get this sense of urgency. This and this is, and that's also just a joyful process. That liberating experience, and sort of exploring and finding and this discovery and really playing with it and bringing other people to it and combining your journey with other people's journeys and getting that sort of mutual.
You see what's happening now? You see what's happening now when you're talking about it? Your eyes lit up.
It's like I told you earlier this week. I had that meeting with a mutual friend, and it's like, and they're like, "Oh wow, interesting." So and there's something there, and that's kind of fun.
That's fun, and that's also what keeps driving you, right? The curiosity to figure out, hey, what is there to learn, what is there to grow on. Christopher, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. I realize that it's got a little darker in here as we've been talking. It's been a while, but I appreciate the conversation. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and staying with us in this conversation. If something from this episode stayed with you, consider passing it on to someone who might need it right now. And if you choose to subscribe or leave a short review, you help these conversations reach others who are still looking for clarity, direction, or a sense of belonging. That is how the circle grows. Quietly, one listener at a time. Keep going, keep becoming you.